Y'all, y'all ready for this? Yeah.
The winner between the Srixon ZX7 iron and the P770 iron is... What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the GolfMagic channel. First of all, if you guys are new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below to keep up to date with all of our equipment news, tour news, and much more going into 2021. If you are new around here, I'm Alex, the video and equipment editor here at GolfMagic, and today I'm going to be bringing you an equipment comparison video that's been much requested on this channel. Over the past month or two, we've been reviewing a lot of Srixon products, namely the Srixon ZX7 irons and ZX7 fairway and drivers. They've got a lot of positive feedback from myself and the whole team at GolfMagic, and it seems like all the viewers here agree with us. The Srixon ZX7 irons, namely, are the irons that I think are the best feeling of 2020. They really did surprise me, and I feel like they can rival any iron that was released this year, last year, you name it. We did do a top 5 players irons video, and the Srixon ZX7 irons wasn't in it because we did just miss out on the testing date. But now that that's done and I've tested it out, I'm going to put the #1 players iron of 2020 to the Srixon ZX7 iron, and that is the TaylorMade P770 iron. I mentioned this at the end of the last video of the Srixon ZX7 iron reviews, and it seemed like a lot of you were very keen to see how these two got on. So let's put these through the paces of looks, technology, performance, and finally price, and see which one comes out as the winner. So first of all, let's talk about the looks of these two irons. Both irons are renowned for being stunning golf clubs and players' irons, and to be honest, from first glance at both clubs, from actual design perspective, there's not too much difference. The shaping of them is very similar, eerily similar. Going into the Srixon ZX7 iron to begin with, I've said in previous videos, I really like the look of this club. There's not too much going on. It still looks modern, but it's quite a classical feel. You can see that you've got the torque cavity in the back of the club, which I'll get onto the technology section, but there's not really too much to mention here. The sole of the club is quite thin, which is what you'd expect from a player's iron, but still you can tell there's a little bit of forgiveness there in comparison to a muscle back that you can get, let's say the TaylorMade P7MC. Looking down at the club, again, it's just very similar to the P770, but their top line isn't the thinnest. There's still some sort of forgiveness there, which is good because it shows that you do have some sort of response and you have something to help you as backup if you hit a chunk or if you thin it. Still though, it's not too chunky that I would consider anything like the Game Improvement iron, and that is the Srixon ZX5, which is more of a much thicker top line and much more of a Game Improvement club. It is so aesthetically pleasing to look at that it's really tough to give any negatives. For me, the top line is quite large for a player's iron, but nothing that I would consider a negative at all, and that's probably because I've been playing Blades for the last year and a half, which is idiotic from me. Going on to the TaylorMade P770, the brother of the P790, you can tell that it is a lot more modern than the Srixon ZX7. There's a lot more shining glare off the back of the club because of the way it's designed. The Srixon ZX7 has a matte finish on the back, and you can see that the P770 has a glossy finish on the back, but to me, I do quite like that on the back of the club because you're never going to get any necessary glare from when you're looking down at it because you can't actually see the back of it. Again, you can see that there's some sort of torque cavity in the back of it, so there is some forgiveness, but still, it is a player's iron. The sole of the club is quite thin, and you can see you've got the speed pocket there as well, which is all about distance, which again, I'll get onto in the technology section, but just echoes players that kind of mid to low handicap range, and it is a really positive club to see just from first glance of design aspects. Looking down at the club again, I would say that this again has a pretty similar design to the Srixon ZX7. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record. The top line has something there again, but it still has some sort of forgiveness, and you can tell it still has that workability and the ability to move it right to left and left to right. It definitely is a player's iron, and comparing it to the P790, you can see that it is that little bit smaller of a head and probably suited to that little bit lower of a handicap player. I would assume just by looking at first glance that the handicap range of this club would be a little bit lower than the P790, but pretty similar to the Srixon ZX7. Comparing the two in terms of design, there's really not too much to go in between them. Actually, both are forged and both just look pretty similar. I think really, I can't really give that much of an accurate technological judgment here because at the end of the day, these do look very similar to each other. The soles of the club, in terms of the width, are pretty identical. I'd say the Srixon is just about a little bit smaller, but then when I look down at the club, I would say that the Srixon ZX7's top line is a little bit thicker. So it swings and roundabouts really. The actual design when looking at it, I prefer actually I don't know. I prefer, I think, the TaylorMade P770, but in all honesty, I could wake up tomorrow and say I prefer the Srixon ZX7 just because there's not too much to go between them. for today, and I'm going to say this now as a concrete standpoint, I do prefer the TaylorMade P770 because of its modernistic approach, whereas the Srixon ZX7, there's not too much going on, which is still good, but for the little kid, that's kind of in my brain. I'm thinking that the TaylorMade P770 is a little bit shinier, looks a bit cooler, so I'm going to go with that one for today. But again, it's such a small margin here that I don't really think there's much to go by. So for me, still top marks of both of them, and there's not too much to go by. Before we get into the performance of both of these clubs here at Grays Golf in Lewes, let's jump back to the studio where I can talk about the technology that both TaylorMade and Srixon have put into both of these irons and what I think this will then translate to in the performance here at the launch monitor. Let's go back to the studio. Going into the technology behind the Srixon ZX7 iron, the main thing that I want to talk about here is the Tour-inspired cavity that Srixon have put into this iron. As you can see in the Srixon ZX7 iron here, there is a Tour-inspired cavity in the club, which means although you can have workability for the Srixon ZX7 iron, there is still that added benefit of forgiveness and that soft feel impact that you do really want with this player's irons. As well as this, the grooves throughout the set are progressive, meaning that in the 8 to the pitching wedge, the grooves are narrower and deeper, meaning that for shots around the green or for shots that are with 150 yards in, you expect to get more fine-tuned spin, which you do want for those short iron approach shots. And finally, the Tour VT sole of the club is made for optimal turf interaction, which I did kind of notice in the look section, but that means that the turf interaction with the fairway is supposed to be as optimal as possible for whatever turf that you are playing golf in. The Srixon ZX7 7 iron comes in with a loft of 32 degrees, so that's not strong or weak by any means, but that kind of makes me think that this club isn't promoting distance in any sort of way. It kind of seems like that with the technology, it's more promoting with the player's iron feel, forgiveness and a bit of workability, which does make sense. The TaylorMade P770, however, is slightly different to the Srixon ZX7 when talking about the technology. Now, this club has a sibling of the TaylorMade P790, which is has more of a broader handicap length than who could be suited to the club. This, however, has a smaller blade length, less offset, and just more of a bladed club in comparison. So decidedly, it would be a little bit harder to hit. This club consists of a forged 4140 steel face, which promotes explosive distance and speed, so already you can see a little bit of a difference in comparing this to the Srixon ZX7 iron. The speed foam in the face, as well as the ultra flexible speed pocket on the sole of the club, again is promoting massive face speed and distances, which is contrasting to the Srixon ZX7 in a way. Although they're both players' irons, this one seems to be promoting distance a lot more than feel and forgiveness, which is quite interesting. And finally, the progressive inverted cone technology, that's a mouthful, is positioned in each iron, meaning that if you do have off-center strikes, it still maximizes ball speeds and you can still get pretty decent dispersion. So finally, a little bit of forgiveness that's mentioned in this club, meaning that you should get pretty decent dispersion across the board for all types of strikes. The TaylorMade P777 iron comes in with a loft of 33 degrees, so actually 1 degree weaker than the Srixon ZX7 iron. Quite confusing. The Srixon is the one that promotes forgiveness and feel, the TaylorMade is the one that promotes distance, whereas it's 1 degree weaker. So, although they have tons of technology behind either, I would think that the Srixon will still go a little bit further, maybe 5 yards or so, purely because at the end of the day, what's most important for distance is the loft of the club. Other than that, I think that these may perform pretty similar, but it's interesting to see how each brand promote themselves. A TaylorMade promoting explosive distance and ball speed, whereas Srixon to go for more of that feel forgiveness approach. It's going to be interesting to see how these compare to each other. Let's jump back to Grays Golf in Lewes and see how these clubs perform. Right then. Right. This was interesting. In the technology section, I said that I would think that the TaylorMade may be about equidistant to the Srixon ZX7, despite the Srixon ZX7 being a degree stronger. That was not the case. I will put the data up on the screen shortly, but let's just talk about iron by iron, the comparison. So I hit the TaylorMade P770 iron first, the 7 iron with the KBS Tour stiff shaft in standard length, standard everything. What I was expecting with the technology that TaylorMade have put into this and reviews that I've also done myself and I've seen previously is the dispersion with the TaylorMade iron to be a bit all over the place in terms of distance. The P790, I've seen a lot of people saying that you have a stock yardage, but then you can sometimes get a hold of one and it goes 20 yards further. So I was expecting this to kind of be all over the place. That was not the case at all with this 7 iron. My dispersion with this P777 iron was the best I think I've ever had here at Grays Golf. I wasn't really hitting it left or right at all. It was pretty consistent. I had a few bad strikes, and the forgiveness of the 7 iron was kind of what I expected. It wasn't amazing, but you still had something there. This 7 iron was going for me around 175 yards, so not crazy distance for anything, but kind of what I expected with the loft of this to be 33 degrees. But what happened when I was hitting bad shots is that it was going about 165 to 168, 69 yards. So losing about 20 to 30 foot, which isn't too bad when you think about it. It was still going straight, so I'd either be on the front of the green or just off. Not bad as a bad shot. I did expect to hit it a little bit further for kind of a stock yardage, maybe get about 180 to 182, which is kind of my stock 7 iron distance. But I'm not going to say that's any sort of negative, because I'd take the dispersion of this 7 iron any day over an extra 5 or 6 yards for a 7 iron. There's not really much point. I wouldn't say this club goes that long of a way, but it's pretty average. But when you kind of talk about TaylorMade, you always expect it to go miles and miles because of the way in which they broadcast themselves. The P790s, for instance, go absolutely bonkers with all the distance that they get. This one feels like what they've done with this is they've calmed it down a little bit. They've made it be a little less mental, and it does definitely attest to that player's iron performance. It does perform very well, and I felt like I could work left to right and right to left if I wanted to, so pretty decent for this one. Having it forged as well, it was just such a soft feel at impact. I was using the TaylorMade TP5X board to keep my spin down, and you can see that I put the data up on the screen now. You can see that my data was pretty spot on for a 7 iron. I wouldn't have any complaints towards this. Spin was top notch, the distance that I was getting was pretty good, and my dispersion was something that I really like to see. For me, how many improvements can I make to this club? It would just be custom fitting, really. I said I'm 6'4", so I would need some sort of customization for it, make it a little bit longer. But for this, technology side of it, it's a little bit different because of these new releases. This was released alongside the P7MC and P7MB, which again, they're not really screaming distance, but I would still expect it to maybe go a little bit further. But nevertheless, it still is a very positive club, and for that player's iron, there's a reason why we ranked it first, because if you perform well with it, you're going to get optimal results. Now the Srixon ZX7 iron, this one, for some reason, this iron has a place in my heart, and I don't really know why. It is an outstanding club, and the various times that I've tested it, for me, I can't really put any sort of foot wrong with it. This occasion, yeah, more or less no difference. As I said in the technology section, this is 1 degree stronger than the TaylorMade P770. So I was expecting a pretty similar distance, but this one did top it by quite a significant margin. This was about a club longer than the P770. Put the data up on the screen now, and as you can see, I was getting about 185 yards with this Srixon ZX7 iron. Quite surprising, really. I was expecting about 5 yards, not 10 yards a whole club difference, so interesting. I was using a different shaft, so I was using the Modus NS Pro shaft, so that could have something to do with it. Maybe it's a bit more suited to my swing, but still, I was pretty surprised by that slight jump in distance there. What I did find though, is that the distance was not as consistent as the P770. I think with the P770 there was about a 10-yard variance between all my shots that I hit during this session. With the Srixon, if I got a little bit over the top and then shut the club face down, which you guys know I really love to do, it would then zoom off the face, and I was getting it about 205 yards, which 20 yards, I don't actually want that. I would rather have a consistent kind of stream of distances every single time. So what I was expecting out of the P770, I kind of got with the Srixon ZX7. But then the performance that I got outside of that, the feel that I got from impact of this club when I hit it right at the middle, which I do sometimes, I promise, is, for me, I'm going to say I think it's unbeatable. It's so positive every single time I hit it, and it was almost like after I was hitting every single shot, I was smiling because of how like nice it felt to hit the ball here at the launch monitor. That may be the most ridiculous thing I've ever said, but I really do think it's true. This club has such optimal performance that even for me, after hitting it a lot, coming back and hitting it again, it still surprises me by how nice it is. Comparing it to the P770, for me, the feel of this is better. I'm saying it right now. But the results from a professional standpoint, I got better results with the P770. If I was a professional golfer, I'm not. If I was a professional golfer and someone just put this data that I got in front of me, I'd pick the P770 because the data that I got was better. I would be hitting a 7 iron more consistently, albeit it was 5 to 10 yards less, but I was hitting it more consistently on the green. This one I was still hitting on the green, but I was hitting it onto a 180, 190 yard green rather than the 170, 175 yard green that I was hitting with the P770. It's such a tough one. there's a professional standpoint here, but there's also me being an amateur golfer thinking that this club feels a little bit nicer. So I'm gonna have a think and let's come back to it and let's give my final verdict. Before I give my verdict, let's quickly talk about the price of both irons. They are pretty similar. The RRP of the TaylorMade P770s are £1,299, but this is greatly reduced now and it's around the £1,000, maybe low 900 mark. And the Srixon is exactly the same. You can get them around the £800 to £900 mark. So there's nothing here for me to say that either are better. They come around the same price. I feel like both are as durable as each other. So in terms of longevity, both top marks here, but I have to decide a winner of this comparison. And as I said in the performance section, there's one part of me that wants to be smart, and there's one part of me that thinks which one would I actually put in my bag. But from a GolfMagic equipment tester, I have to be as honest as possible and what I think is the better club based by what performance I've got here at Grays Golf. So the winner between the Srixon ZX7 iron and the P770 iron is the TaylorMade P770 iron. Don't get mad, I'm sorry, but as I said, the data that I got from here at Grays Golf means that I have to pick the TaylorMade P770 iron. Although off impact, the Srixon ZX7 iron does feel a bit better. Not too much, but it does feel better on the pure strikes. The performance and the data that I got from the P770 is better. The dispersion I got is better. If I'm trying to think how I want to improve my game or how you should improve your game, the P770 iron for me got better dispersion, albeit 5 yards less distance. But what I should say to you is hitting it straighter is more important than hitting it long if you're hitting it a decent way. So the winner here is the P770 iron. That doesn't mean the Srixon ZX7 iron is not something to look at. As you can probably tell by this video, the last video, the video before, I'm in love with this club, and for me, it's tough for me to think actually which one I'd put in my bag. For me, I'd need to test it a little bit more and just see how it would perform in other situations. But in this video today, the winner is the P770 iron. If you guys think the Srixon ZX7 iron should be the winner, or if I've missed anything out, let me know down in the comments as to what you thought about this video. It was a really tough one to decide, as you can tell. I'm still a bit conflicted. I'm not sure if I made the right decision, but I had to go with my head here rather than my heart. So yeah, tough one. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It was really interesting putting these two premium players' irons against each other here at Grays Golf. It's a lot of fun to test as many irons as possible. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a like down below and let me know what irons you want me to test next. Because again, this is up to you. Let me know down in the comments and I'll be sure to schedule it over the next few months. If you guys are new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and turn notifications on. Keep up to date with all our equipment comparisons, news and much more. There's a lot of really new exciting content coming out in terms of clubs, tour news and much more going into 2021. And I want all you guys to be a part of it for the new year. I'll see you guys in the next video.